Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and as you know, I tend to produce a new plugin every week, and a fair bit of the time I'm digging up something from the dawn of time, or I'm doing something that has been popular with people. I've made lots and lots of different plugins. I don't always come up with anything that excites me, because sometimes I'm doing plugins that'll just work well for people. And even then, that's not always a given. Occasionally I get sassed pretty hard for stuff that I do. However, this time I'm on to something that I enjoy. I'm back on the dithers again. And the plugin I am bringing you today is called Airwindows Dark. Now here's what this is before I start playing with it. Oh, also I should switch over to this. Here's what this is before I start playing with it. Airwindows Dark is another form of dither. It's kind of like the Studio 10 stuff, which, or Not Just Another Dither. Not Just Another Dither does like Benford Realness calculations. Dark is a little bit different, and it's not the only experiment that I've got in store of this nature, but this week we're starting with Dark. And what it does is it decides whether to quantize up or down like any dither would do. And normally with a dither what you've got is noise that helps you decide what that's going to be. But what Dark does is it extrapolates what the sort of trajectory of the waveform is going to be and makes its choice based on what is going to be closest to the straightest trajectory from that point that it can possibly do. So this is a filter. But it's a filter down at the 16th or 24th least significant bit level. So it's a subtle filter. But the idea here, if you're going to be doing truncation anyway, why certain kinds of audio, certain kinds of music need to not present the appearance of high frequency stuff poking out and being really present. And this is something that I feel digital often does really badly. Like you will very often get some kind of aliasing artifact or something going on where you've got your mix, you've got your audio, but then when you were listening to your digital result, even if it's fairly quiet, you've got this stuff going on that is both inharmonic and really high in frequency. And like analog doesn't like doing stuff that's really high in frequency. Many formats that you use in analog just straight up resist it. They just do not want to put out stuff over, say, 10K. And it might seem like, oh, that's terrible. That is inaccurate. You're losing something. But if you listen to stuff over a distance, air also loses those high frequencies. So if you're trying to do a mix or a mastering or any kind of resulting music where you're not getting that sort of ASMR stimulus response thing of feeling like things are crawling on the surface of your eardrum, you want that kind of behavior. So let's start fooling with Dark a little bit and see what we get. Now this is essentially nothing yet. We don't have it turned on. And I've removed monitoring from this setup because monitoring also contains dithering in its way. So if I simply turn Dark on and reduce this to 16-bit, you'll hear not a big change. Maybe that seems a little darker to you. Turn it back off. Maybe that seems a little brighter. Maybe it seems a little darker, but the trouble is if you are doing like you're listening to stuff on YouTube, then it's not really going to do a great job of presenting to you a super high resolution thing. So we can exaggerate things, but we can exaggerate them in a couple of ways. And one way is by using MV. And I'm going to show you now, hopefully it might even be hearable at the 16-bit point, but I can exaggerate that too. What it sounds like with Dark working on a super, super deep reverby kind of thing. Now this kind of sound is supposed to sound really distant. It's pure reverb. And Dark is engaged. If I turn it off, you might be hearing a little more in the way of sort of air that's not supposed to be there. But we can quantize and go to 16-bit fixed point like this. But we can also do something, a little something called word length shift gain. As you can see, it's not really called word length shift gain, but YouTube will scorn me for saying the real name of this plugin because they think I'm saying a naughty word. And I've already got my butt booted off of Facebook just for posting links to YouTube to two separate places that were both me. So I'm not taking any chances. Anyways, if I turn on the word length shift gain on -8 and then +8 bits, now we have Dark quantizing to a 8-bit depth. And if it's not engaged, and this other one is not engaged, this B and dither box, you won't hear anything because the overall thing is at 32-bit. But if we turn on simple truncation, now we can hear there is a serious change. So this is the sound of raw truncation. And I can also show you the sound of TPDF dither. And as you can see, that's a kind of bright, shiny sound. But if I turn on Dark, we get a very different behavior. And that's because Airwindows Dark is reconstructing the audio on the fly at the bit depth that it's working, always to try to make the darkest audio output that it possibly can. It's quite happy to hang on to bass, but it's going to try to remove everything that is a higher frequency. So we can turn on our audio again, turn it off, and listen to the depth of audio that we have in here. You're listening to 8-bit. And of course, if we turn it off, it'll be trying to retain it, and you're not getting raw truncation out of it. If we did that same thing at raw truncation, you're going to hear this. And it turns bright, and then it hangs on to the grindy noises as hard as it can. And if we go to TPDF, we go to silence behind a wall of noise. And this is the correct option. It's definitely better than the grindy and clinging to ugly noises raw truncation. But if we turn on Dark, the output of our audio already sounds less bright, even though it's running into 8-bit. And then rather than going to grindy, horrible noise or going to a bed of bright noise, because TPDF is still bright noise and high-pass TPDF is even brighter. This fades itself to silence. So what I'm going to do is carefully turn off my word length shift gain. First the 8 dB boost, or the 8-bit boost, and then the 8-bit subtract. And we can go back to some of our audio. And the real trick with this, and I can pretty well guarantee you're not going to hear this one, but that's fine. Those of us who like dithering stuff to make it be correct also like dithering to 24-bit, whether that is for making 24-bit audio for people to listen to or simply to monitor through. The monitoring plugin defaults to a 24-bit, not just another dither style dither, which is a similar kind of cleverness, except for that one is doing its choices so it does have a background noise rather than going to silence. And it's working on trying to make the lowest levels of the digital noise floor as natural sounding as possible. It's running a complicated algorithm to do that. But if you do dark instead, and as you can see, I've got the 16-bit, you can make CDs using this. In fact, if you're doing orchestral music or ambient or anything, you're Brian Eno, you want everything to be dark sounding. You don't want edges in your CD that you're making, assuming that you're still making CDs, which I can't see why anybody would be doing that now. This is available to you, but it starts off as HD 24-bit. And you won't be able to hear this, but if you care about dithering to 24-bit and like monitoring through that, just because like every 15 minutes or something, there's some kind of detail in there that you would like to have been done correctly with dither, now you can do it. So you got music, you got your audio, 24-bit. And it may just be that if you're going to be using dithering to 24-bit as part of your chain, because you're trying to monitor stuff and not lose anything to digital distortions or whatever, you're being thorough. Either you're being super thorough or you feel like you can hear the crunchiness. My guess is that when you're hearing crunchiness of inadequate 24-bit dithering, you're not hearing it regularly, but I feel like if there's a splinter in your shoe and it pokes you only every 10 minutes, it still bothers the hell out of you. And that's my take on how the dither thing works. This might be your cup of tea if you particularly like your audio. And remember, this is essentially a dither, even though it doesn't work like a normal dither. So what it does to the sound is at the least significant bit level. The only thing it's capable of doing is choosing to round up or down when quantizing. And it can do that at 16-bit, which you can maybe hear the difference a little bit better because it's down around 96K below full scale. Or it can do it at 24-bit. And if you need something along the lines of a dither, and you're interested in getting a particular tone quality out of your system, rather than just doing something like TPDF where it's correct, or doing something like Not Just Another Dither where it maybe brings a naturalness and a different approach to things, this is closer to the Studio Tan style of thing, where it's intentionally changing stuff. But it's intentionally changing stuff so that your noise floor, and you heard it directly at the 8-bit level, your noise floor is softer and darker and less grating and less bright. And that will make the backdrop of your music have a more sort of like dark quietness to it. And I believe that this stuff does come across, but this is another one of those dither things. This is controversial. There are people who don't even think you should use dither for 16-bit, which I think is pretty crazy. You heard the differences between this in TPDF and just truncation at effectively an 8-bit level. Do you want to use something like this over your monitors so that when you're listening to stuff just raw off of your DAW and it's going to your digital to analog converters, which are presumably taking it at 24-bit, would you want to be dithering using Dark? Maybe you crank stuff way up and then you can get a sense of some of these things a little bit more. Would you want to be using that just for your general listening pleasure or for making your 24-bit files with? Because maybe you're trying to mix stuff and have it sit back farther in the sound stage. Stuff needs to sound as if it's farther away rather than everything being up on the surface of your eardrum. Well, here you go. And you're welcome. And I have even more wackiness in store, but that's not for this week. And I've also got some other things that have been promised coming around as well. But that's just maybe. The reason I'm still here doing all of this is because I'm Patreon supported. I don't go on about the Patreon all that much because I don't desperately need lots of people to be jumping on the Patreon for me to be okay. I can do this work. I'm fine. I'm doing good. In fact, if you need the money more, then you should keep it. But this is why I'm still here doing this. And this has brought you a new Not Really a Dither, just when I thought I had figured it all out and I didn't have anything further to offer in there because I thought it was done. I thought that with Not Just Another Dither and the Studio 10 stuff that I did, Studio 10 and Dither Me Timbers, which were a sort of precursor to this, I thought I basically had it all worked out. I was not correct. And in fact, it's going even further than this, but that's for another day. So if you like using this, because it is free for you to use with no restriction, and in fact, you get the source code, top that, subscription services. But if you like using this, you can jump on the Patreon and throw another, I decided rather than it being like $60 or $50 per plugin per year, I decided they were going to be $20 per year, in the belief that people were going to scale back their commitments and then people just threw more money. So what can I do but keep giving you new stuff? But by all means, go and up your Patreon pledge or start one if you don't have one or something like that. And I'll keep trying to come up with stuff because I do seem to be able to come up with stuff. And I don't really mind doing things that are on the fringe and not really, like, nobody else has this. Bottom line is nobody else has this. If you're looking for a way to make the texture of your digital productions, especially if you're going to CD when it might actually be obvious, but even if you're just worried about your 24-bit outputs and stuff, and you're trying to maybe top, for instance, this is what I sometimes find myself doing, is I am doing a raw capture with the music that I do. And so I'm putting out downloads that are just the raw 2496. By the way, this does adapt to higher sample rates as it goes. It does a sort of window that brings the darkening area down to the 1 to 3K area where it's making, it's not just in the supersonics. It's actively trying to make its choices that will actually darken the deep background of the sound in the hearable treble area rather than just the ultrasonic area. Something like Studio 10, that was more working in the ultrasonic area, frankly. It did not do this. So if you're looking to do that, whether it be in 16 or 24-bit, then this might be right up your alley. And the neat thing about it is this is not a filter. This is not an EQ. Technically, this is not a processor because this is exploiting a quantizing factor, which is going to happen one way or another. It's going to happen. You're going to either truncate or you're going to maybe TPDF dither if you're doing things like correctly, or you're going to like Not Just Another Dither if you're using monitoring. You're going to do something that is going to truncate to 24-bit for your monitoring and perhaps your high quality output, or 16-bit if you're still making CDs. And that's going to happen regardless, whatever you do with filtering, EQ, or anything like that. So this is applying a darkening factor. Specifically, that's what it does. That's what it's for. In an area that you cannot otherwise reach. You can filter all you want, and then if you're doing a TPDF and correctly going to your 16 or 24-bit, that's going to add brightness in terms of a bright, white, noisy noise floor that you can't make go away. All you can do is hope that it being really quiet, it's not going to be obtrusive. This makes that noise floor way quieter. In fact, you heard it went to silence when it completely shut up. And nothing you do in filtering or in digital processing in the normal sense can do exactly this. So if this has anything to do with what you're trying to make happen, then maybe you will like it. I hope so. So here, let me get away from my zoomed in logic. And yeah, Dark is the new Airwindows word length reducer. It's not really a dither, but it works in the same situation as a dither. And if you use the, shall I say, word length shift gain, it can be used for any word length that you're trying to output to, as long as you do it correctly. And it defaults to 24-bit, so you can use it as your last plugin. And you can also set it to 16-bit for if you're doing CDs. I hope you like it. I had a lot of fun making it, and I was very pleased with what I got out of it, even though this is another one of those dithery type things where it is rather controversial, and people will argue that you shouldn't care about it and that I'm just totally wrong. And well, you already know if you're paying attention to stuff like that. If you're paying attention to stuff like that, then you can do as you please. If, on the other hand, you're not only interested in stuff like the dithering and dithering to 24-bit and all this really like the dithering to floating point and all the kind of stuff that I specialize in, and you already like that kind of stuff, and you're interested in where it can go, guess what? I just went a little farther with that than I even knew was possible myself. As long as you're looking for a dark, distant, and that's not really even fair to say that, because it's like, this is not going to, dithering at 24-bit is not going to make anybody's mix sound really dark. It's taking the backdrop, the far distances of your mix, and pushing them back even farther, making them even darker, making the silence around your music more silent and blacker, and in a way that is not possible to do in any other way. Like Not Just Another Dither is pretty good, and it brings its own stuff. I would not assume that this is going to beat Not Just Another Dither for you, because it might be that the naturalization quality of it wins. But if you really need the audio to seem as if it has physical space and distance, and the reverb tails seem really far away, this might be the only one. This might be the best one for you. For now. And with that, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.